We're also getting the final races called from the midterm elections in terms of the House. And with these final races now shoring up, it's starting to look like the size of the Democratic Party's win in Congress not only exceeded expectations, it may have been an historic record. So we'll have more on that coming up as well. In terms of the midterm elections in the U.S. Senate, though, the very last U.S. Senate race is wrapping up tonight as we speak, and we are going to be covering this over the course of this hour. I will tell you, as we're starting to watch these results come in the U.S. Senate race in Mississippi tonight, if you need further civic inspiration about your importance as a citizen or what a big deal your one lone personal vote could be, I want you to also know that today in the great state of Alaska, the State Division of Elections certified the results of this year's midterm elections in that state in Alaska. One of the races that was certified today by the state is for a state legislative district, so a state House district. I think it's in Fairbanks. It's House District 1. And I believe we can put up on the screen the results of that state legislative race in Alaska as certified by the state today. The Republican, Bart LeBon, got 2,661 votes. The Democrat, Catherine Dodge, got 2,661 votes. Not a typo. The official state certified results in that House seat in Alaska, it's an exact tie. And that tied race is for a seat in the state legislature. And the state legislature is also tied. So not only would the shift of a single vote determine who wins that seat, the shift of a single vote could also determine which party controls the entire legislature. I love this story out of Alaska so much, right? When they realized the Democrat and the Republican were tied, in the initial count, they did a machine recount of the ballots. Turns out it's tied. After that, they did a recount by hand. After the hand recount, turns out, yeah, it's tied. And then today it was certified as a tie. But here's the incredible drama in this one. This is from the Anchorage Daily News today. So after the initial result shows a tie, and the machine recount shows a tie, and the hand recount shows a tie, and it becomes clear that this tie means the whole legislature is tied. After all of that, they found a vote. What? They found one vote. Quote, a single ballot remains uncounted. Quote, that ballot was found in a gray secrecy sleeve on election night and was deposited in a ballot box normally used for absentee or questioned ballots. In conjunction with this story, the Alaska Daily News published this picture of the State Review Board considering this tied race and trying to figure out how to do a complete count of this race. I think in this picture, in the foreground there, do you see the little hand holding that ballot? I think they're showing us the one lonely ballot here that they can't decide what to do with. You can see what it says there from Fairbanks Precinct number 6. This ballot was found loose with the questioned ballot materials. There was no questioned ballot envelope to account for this. I think this might be the actual one ballot in question. Alaska Daily News reports that this one loose, mysterious ballot is a vote for the Democrat in the race. But because of the weird circumstances under which this one ballot was found, they still don't exactly know how or if they're going to count it, according to the Daily News. Even though the vote has been counted and recounted again and now certified, that single ballot, which could decide the whole thing, is still legally considered to be on the bubble because of the strange circumstances in which it was found. It's as yet uncounted, quote, pending further legal analysis. So that one House race and partisan control of that state legislature looks like it comes down to a tie, or maybe that one ballot, and they're not, I mean, if that doesn't inspire you to vote and that your vote could matter, I don't know what could inspire you, except for maybe the news that this is actually the second time this year that this has happened. At the beginning of this year, in January, the exact same thing happened in Virginia. Republicans had a big majority in the House of Delegates in Virginia, but Democrats had a really big year in the off-year elections, the 2017 elections in Virginia. Democrats swept all the statewide races, and they made up all this ground in the legislature. Ultimately, the question of which party would control the legislature came down to the last race that wasn't called in Virginia. It was the 94th House District. They counted and recounted and double-checked and made sure, and it turned out that race was an absolute tie. The exact same number of votes cast for the Republican and for the Democrat. And the control of the state legislature riding on whether the Democrat or the Republican won. And the way they decided that one in Virginia was by drawing straws. They pulled a piece of paper out of a bowl in a ceremony that would have been way more fun if they had like cut cards or flipped a coin or something. But, you know, if the news gods of civic participation do this to you, right? Do this to your country twice in a year, right? Where it's not just your local representative, but your representation in your state is decided by a margin of 0 votes. And ultimately, it has to come down to maybe the luck of the draw because it's that close, or maybe one ballot that was put in the wrong box and nobody knows whether or not to count it. If you get that happening in your country twice in 1 year, those are signs from the news god heavens that your voter registration matters and your efforts to vote matter. And it may all come down to you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.